All right, this is my presentation, The Origins of Secret Societies.
And who are you?
I'm Doug Martin. It's great to be back here at the third S.E.E.D conference, S.E.E.D 3 Sprout. It's really an honor to be here among these enlightened speakers. I'm totally blown away by the information presented thus far. And this is basically a general chronicle regarding the rise and influence of occult organizations. So in order to fully understand this topic, it's dealing with a hidden history and the reasons as to why knowledge would be hidden in the first place. I'm going to start off reading a little bit from a lecture from Manly P. Hall on the ancient mysteries and secret societies. Try to put this into a little bit better perspective for us, because it's really a vast topic, and it's actually one of the most important topics to understand. So I'm going to do the reading here from Manly P. Hall, and then we'll take it from there. Modern sociologists have made some analysis of the function of secret societies in the development of man's modern culture. And while these findings, for the most part, are based entirely upon cultural factors, they give us some rather interesting information which we can enrich and enlarge through reference to a larger frame of research. First of all, a secret society is usually a group of persons divided from their contemporaries by certain obligations, private assembly, and addiction to a particular or special code of conduct. Such societies began, of course, in the primitive world. Early in the history of man's social experience, tribes, barbaric, primitive, savage, developed secret societies. These were particularly concerned with the over-concept of that time, mainly the importance of certain rituals and ceremonies in connection with the building of the individual into his tribal life. All of the important periods of life were marked with ritual, ceremony, and symbol. And the most important of ancient ceremonies of this nature had to do with the concept of citizenship, as it was then understood. Certain trials, obligations, and revelations, by certain trials, obligations, and revelations, the person was prepared to become part of his social order. In tribal times, he received the wisdom of his tribe, and he proved that he was worthy of that wisdom by undergoing certain trials, real or psychological dangers, indicating his heroism, his patience, his willingness to self-sacrifice. His dedication to the same principles which governed his tribal life. After his initiation into the secret society, he became a full-fledged member of his community. We may therefore say that in this respect, the secret society was also the school.
Don't forget to flip your slides.
That's the one you're on.
Apologies. or the university, if we may say such, of primitive societies. Here, the accumulated wisdom of the people was made available to each new generation through ritual and ceremony. At the time, the secret society bound the person to his spiritual conviction. At the same time, through this association, he came to know the deities known to govern his tribe. He was religiously obligated to the ideals and principles of the tribal faith. All of his political and social instructions suspended from his religious conviction. It was, therefore, incredible that anyone could pass through these tribal mysteries without becoming strongly convinced of the importance of the religion of his people. In addition to these important factors, the tribes and tribal mysteries had to do with the genetic problems recognized at that time. Among our southwestern Indians, for example, each pueblo has 2 tribes, and the members of these sides have certain religious obligations and certain tribal rites and ceremonies. Marriage must always be across the pueblo. In other words, marriage must always be into the opposite social group. This was important, as experience had taught that too close intermarriage might prove detrimental to the tribal life. Laws governing conduct were also measured across the pueblo. But in all important matters, the 2 sides met for conference, consultation, and contemplation of the vital needs of the whole people. Gradually, the secret societies became the virtual custodians of authority, causing the modern sociologists to advance the concept that they were highly autocratic groups. If this may be considered legitimate, it may be pointed out that all life at all times has been a period blending of autocratic blending and autocratic leadership in a democratic state. Any individual who assumes leadership, even with the consent of the governor, gains certain autocratic powers and prerogatives. It was the work of the old secret societies to so enrich the culture, moral and spiritual life of the leader that he might be inclined or not, that he might not be inclined to pervert his authority or to use his powers to exploit or enslave his people. Thus, the secret society educated the leader not merely in the arts and sciences as we generally consider them, but in the moral values, in the ethical overtone essential to proper government or to any executive or responsible position. In the classical world, the secret society took a new form. It became more exclusively the custodian of learning. And we may say that through the classical world, particularly Greece, Egypt, and the Roman Empire, most secret societies were not basically political in their implications. It is true that no individual can refrain from some involvement in politics, especially if he is an informed and conscientious person. It cannot be said that Plato was a politician, nor can it be said that the Platonic dialogues are completely non-political. To the philosopher, politics represents enlightened leadership, and he contributes in any way he can towards this end. And in periods of despotism or tyranny, his weight is naturally vested authority. And in periods of despotism or tyranny, his weight is naturally against vested authority, which has perverted its privileges. For this reason, many prominent leaders in the religious, philosophical, and cultural life of mankind have been persecuted and even martyred because they have interfered with entrenched political beliefs. During the classical period also, we see the secret society moving behind nearly all forms of generalized education. In Rome, Greece, and Egypt, young people were tutored by professional teachers after they had received what we might term a broad education, considering the opportunities and knowledge of their day. They were then, for the most part, presented for initiation into one of the secret societies. It being understood that it was the duty of such societies to integrate the person, to give him the association, the dedication, the consecration, by means of which his knowledge in any field might be clarified, deepened, and that danger of selfishness or perversion mitigated so far as was possible. This is the general story. And of course, even in the classical period, the overtones remained essentially religious. The secret societies were sanctuaries. Those who entered them were instructed in the true meaning of their faith, were given certain keys or interior knowledge, and that in Oriental religious societies, they were given certain scientific methods for the advancement of their personal lives, particularly their internal development of resources. And that's the late great Manly P. Hall. So in order to understand what knowledge is imparted in the secret societies that we don't find in the general education, we really have to discern between what is exoteric knowledge and esoteric knowledge. Exoteric knowledge is intended for or likely to be understood by the general public, current or popular among the general public, relating to the outside world, external, from the Greek exoterikos, outer, outside.
Do you have a slide change?
Esoteric is intended for or likely to be understood by only a small number of people with specialized knowledge or interest. From the Greek esoterikos, within, into. So we really want to be able to discern what true occult knowledge is from mysticism, because I would define mysticism as basically the imagination run amok, trying to, floundering in darkness, trying to discover what can only be ascertained through the building blocks of knowledge. And mysticism generally is a cul-de-sac. It's leading us astray. It's catering to the ego. It's the idea that it doesn't need to receive information from the external to find the path to the true internal self. So mysticism, it could best be defined as an exoteric religion. But I'm not trying to defer us from understanding mysticism, because a lot of the knowledge that we need is contained in the mysticism. I mean, they do work with some of the information that's been occulted. So, when I started on my path, it kind of started out with, the political corruption awakening. You know, but we can't confuse becoming aware of government corruption with any kind of true awakening. It's only a jumping off point. And it's only going to benefit us if it starts us on our path. We need to know inherently that government is corrupt, because that's the nature of government. It's corrupted by its nature. The system is the cancer. So trying to fix the system is not the answer. The answer is to fix the self and to remember the true self, to reassemble from dismemberment, to remember, put it all back together. So, the true initiate in search of truth must be willing to go down all of the rabbit holes. But don't get stuck on the cul-de-sac, because it's all coming from within. It's all part of what we are, who we are, the true self. Occultism is the hidden knowledge, and it's the knowledge of self and the environment in which the self is operating. So the microcosm and the macrocosm. And I'm just going to throw this in there because I saw a really brilliant, just a little YouTube video that somebody put up the other day. I was impressed by it. And he used the allegory of the Matrix. And as a young man, I was very encouraged by that. But he defined the Matrix as the ego itself. And it's the conscious, beta consciousness, problem-solving consciousness that we need to be engaged in day-to-day, daily activities to interact with the world in which we are a part. But there's another component to our conscious makeup. It's the unconscious, or the subconscious, I should say. And the subconscious is the true macrocosmic self, in which all knowledge is contained. So, with the Matrix being the ego, we have to reconnect that to the subconscious to get out of the Matrix. Because as long as we're in that ego-driven self, we are stuck in that matrix perpetually. We've got to shed that ego and recognize the true self, which is the all-knowing connection to everything that is us, everything that we truly are. And it's a very necessary, ultimate, that's really our true purpose, to recognize the true self, because only then do we shed the idea that we are our physical body, that we are our materialistic reality, that's all there is, that death is just the end, when we die it's over. That's not true, because we are much more than that. We are the all. We are I'm not really explaining that right, but to get out of the matrix is to conquer the ego and to recognize the true self. And I think I can better elaborate on that as I move forward through this. But, so what is the occult?
You want me to do that for you?
The word occult is derived from the Latin adjective occultus, hidden from sight, which comes from the Latin verb occultare, to hide, to conceal, to keep secret. Both are in turn derived from the Latin noun oculus, or eye. And basically use this slide to show, you see an iceberg, you're seeing only a fraction of what it actually is. Because the majority of what it is completely hidden from view. How shall we define, okay, well this is a quote from C.W. Leadbeater in 1913. And I felt that he eloquently stated this. How shall we define occultism? The word occult is derived from the Latin oculus, hidden, so that it is the study of the hidden laws of nature. Since all the great laws of nature are in fact working in the invisible world far more than the visible, occultism involves the acceptance of a much wider view of nature. That which is ordinarily taken. The occultist, then, is a man who studies all the laws of nature that he can reach or of which he can hear, and as a result of his study, he identifies himself with these laws and devotes his life to the service of evolution. So, working definition of the occult is a body of science, which is not widely known to the general population, consisting of hidden knowledge about the workings of the human psyche and the laws of nature, both seen physical laws and unseen spiritual laws. So our world is basically structured in a hierarchical system. And this is due to different levels of consciousness, which is different levels of awareness, different levels of our ability to decode information. And it obviously we're talking about compartmentalization, and each individual has the responsibility to forward on their path and come out of that base level of awareness and move towards a better understanding and our better ability to raise our frequency, to decode the information. Because the information is, we can only glean from it what frequencies that we can decode. So we have to raise our frequency, which we don't generally, aren't generally doing that with general curriculum. It's the knowledge of, the most effective methods are the mysteries, the mystery traditions, because we're talking about an unseen body of science, an unknown body of science. See, esoteric knowledge doesn't come looking for us. It doesn't come knocking on our door. You know, if you want to be a doctor, that's going to take esoteric medical knowledge. And if you want to be a lawyer, that's going to take esoteric judicial knowledge, legislative knowledge. But the point is, we would have to, if that's what we wanted, we have to go in pursuit of that. We have to seek that out. Go where we have to go to get to where we need to be. And I'm going to go ahead and change slides. Maybe I can better break it down on this one. So, in the system that we've set up in this world is a hierarchy, and it's about compartmentalization. And that means that each level, each floor is unaware of what's going on the floor above it. And we can look at that from the point of view that, they're hiding the knowledge from us. But the truth of the matter is, they can't do our work for us. That's our responsibility. But, every institution that's ever been in existence operates in a hierarchical system. And this compartmentalization allows for the abdication of our responsibility. The idea that somebody else knows what's best for us. And that can never be true. We each have the responsibility to learn and understand the difference between right and wrong. When we think that we're abdicating our responsibility, that's not actually true, because it's not actually possible. We still have that responsibility. And all we're doing is allowing for the suffering to continue and trying to burrow our head deeper into the sand while evil runs amok in our presence. Levels of knowledge and hierarchy within the institutions, from bank cashier to the chairman of the board. I could probably break this down a lot more, but I'm just going to keep moving forward because I'm not really clicking exactly right. But I have the points I want to make, so just keep moving forward here. I think a lot of us are familiar with some of this information here anyway. It's just basically a caveat to what we're going to talk about. So why has such knowledge been hidden from humanity? The work of the dark occultist or sorcerer is always done in secrecy and is intended to contravene the freedom and prosperity of all others besides themselves by hiding or occulting certain knowledge as a means of creating a power differential between those in the know and those who are ignorant of it, and by working through fear and manipulation to bring about compliance with their own selfish will. Carlos Castaneda said that all the sorcerer has to do is give us their mindset, which is dual consciousness, to keep us in cognitive dissonance with ourselves and never know the true selves, never connect with that subconscious, what we truly are. And dark occultists have completely infiltrated and permeated all institutional walks of life on Earth. Through their manipulation of these institutions, they currently hold the overall mindset of the human population in a state of general unconsciousness, thus holding humanity in a state of slavery. But there's also benevolent reasons why this knowledge has been hidden. And, for me to really explain this, I could go on a tirade. But to fully understand it, we have to understand the evolution of the mythos. Because the knowledge, somebody didn't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to hide this knowledge from everybody. And then I'll have all the power and I'll be God, worship like God on earth. That's not exactly how it worked. We have to understand that the earliest cultures that were endeavoring to build the knowledge, they created methods through ritual and sign language. I don't mean sign language for the hearing impaired, but it's similar. But before words. It's not spoken with words. In fact, the knowledge that we need to understand can't really be imparted with words. We have to understand the language of archetypes and symbol. And as the mythos evolves, the methods change. So while it constitutes an evolution of the mythos and the knowledge, at a certain point, we start to lose sight of what it was originally about. And once it had deteriorated to the point where it really couldn't be recovered, that's constitutes the point where the dark occultists said, well, we're going to take what we got and just use this to attempt to coercively control and only teach what we want taught, and then hoard everything else for ourselves. We want conformity and obedience to the laws that we dictate. So this knowledge, or this rise of these secret societies, or the occulting of knowledge, is not just due to an intentional act. It happened through negligence over time. And, to fully understand that the pyramids were built as a repository for the pinnacle of the evolution of the first stage of the mythos, which was stellar. As we moved away from that, when we went into the lunar cult, it fell farther away from where it really came from, what it really meant. And then once we get to the solar cult, we really neglected it to the point where even the priest class no longer understood it deeply enough. The idea that Moses turned the cane into the serpent, and then the people followed him. What that's about is he demonstrated knowledge of the ancient mythos, which was stellar. And thus he restored the faith of the people by demonstrating that he had knowledge of the origins of the knowledge. So I don't know if I'm fully explaining that right, but I want you to try to keep that in mind. So light occultists have hidden occult knowledge in order to prevent its complete eradication during exceedingly draconian times, and at other times to prevent it from falling into the hands of would-be dark occultists who knew of the empowerment that could be gained from such knowledge, but wanted to use it for immoral purposes. The great work of light occultists is the distribution of occult knowledge freely to humanity, thereby ending the slavery of humanity by eliminating the widespread ignorance which dark occultists exploit to gain and maintain their control. Light occultists would be better referred to as de-occultists because they reveal and spread knowledge which has been hidden and which must be known in order for freedom to be manifested. So what knowledge does occultism hide? Basically these two bodies of knowledge. What we could refer to as the minor arcana and the major arcana. The lesser arcana or the greater arcana. But don't construe lesser with less important, because they're both equally important. Occultism comprises and hides two bodies of knowledge. So the lesser arcana deals with the microcosmic inner world, knowledge of the self, the human psyche, and how it operates. And it's demonstrated here from the tarot, the Fool card. And then the major arcana, macrocosmic outer world, is knowledge of natural law, universal and moral law, and the physical sciences. So here we're taking a look at the mystery traditions that I'm referring to. And they are Freemasonry, Tarot, and Kabbalah, or Kabbalism. These are all ancient methods. And they basically all evolved out of this evolution of this mythos. It's totally different than our Western way of thinking, because it deals with the abstract. Whereas our Western will only deal with objective science. In order for it to be objective, there has to be an object, and thus ignores the unseen laws in nature. And there's controversy about which one of these is the most ancient or where these came from. I'm going to tell you straight up. It all came from Egypt. And when I say Egypt, I mean the entire Nile Valley. Yeah. Question?
No, sir. I was just acknowledging Egypt, which has been a major influence on what has happened in the world for a long time.
And again, we're limited in our thinking by our language. What Freemasonry actually is has nothing to do with lodge masonry. It's largely misunderstood and was not termed Freemasonry. In fact, when this came into existence, if there was any language at all, it was completely monosyllabic and mostly symbol and sign language. So I'm making the statement with regard to which one of these is the most ancient, is that it's all what we should term Freemasonry, a knowledge that was, or a method that was originally termed the craft. But we have to understand there's different levels or degrees of initiation in the craft. And the actual architects or the builders of the temples, they were often only initiated into maybe the first or second degrees of the mysteries. And but they were still participating in the same great work, and they still had opportunity to raise into the higher degrees. But the knowledge is, interestingly enough, it's stored in the architectural sciences and the sciences of measurement and weights and balance, and in that way the knowledge got transported through time. So we have an opportunity to rediscover what it is. Now let's look at what these three traditions have in common. They all share this structure of the pillars. And when you think of the pillars, you should think of the two pillars because they represent polarity. And the polarities is ideally it all is about the polarity, because in the physical reality it is duality. Everything has its polar opposite. So we have to embrace those as part of the self, and then bring those into balance. Without balance, there is no third pillar, no middle pillar, and no way to truly ascend from the floor of the base consciousness. But these are and when you work with these traditions, you have to work with them comparatively. I wouldn't say that one is more important than the other. I mean, ideally, I'd say they were all the same thing, but it's well, geez. these pillars, what we see on the Kabbalah, the right hand path and the left hand path essentially represents those pillars. And then the middle path again would represent the middle pillar. And then in the tarot, same thing. You have the pillar of Jachin and the pillar of Boaz. And then the Freemasonry, it's the same thing. So you see that ubiquity. That's why it's called comparative religion. Because if you only study one religion, you can't really understand what it actually means. I mean, I would suggest that most people that are self-proclaimed Christians don't really understand what that is. And Freemasonry, what that actually is even, less understood. So, all of the exoteric religions derive from a detritus of the mysteries. And also the science of astronomy, because the science of astronomy is a big part of the evolution of the mythos. And that knowledge was held by the stellar people for at least 60,000 years before they let anybody else have it. And the main thing I'm trying to say is that the origins of astronomy is directly connected with the origins of the mystery traditions and the evolution of the mythos itself. So, well, I could tell you, I could explain this stuff a lot better, but I don't want to get bogged down on it. I'm just hoping it keeps coming out as I want it to, because I really am kind of improvising this.
I got a question.
Sure.
This is for everyone in the room. How did the Egyptians build those pyramids and we can't even build today to the same scale?
Well, like I said in my first presentation, it's not really a matter of we can't build them. It's really a matter of it's unfeasible, because it's not economically feasible. I mean, look at the technology we have. There's nothing we can't do when we channel our energy into that place.
Yeah,
But they would have.
But there's some of those pyramids that we don't have a single crane in the world that can lift it. How did they do that?
Well, we're not talking about the how. We're talking about
That's
the
what
why.
that's what I just asked, was how.
Well,
How
I
did
don't
they do
ascribe to those points of view in any way. Because I know damn well we can do anything. That's, But I suggested that they were built over a long period of time.
Does anyone in here think that there was alien influences that helped them at that time?
Either that or a higher form of engineering that we haven't figured out yet.
Okay?
Yeah,
Sorry.
just finish it.
Sorry.
It's an idea, you put it out.
I just wanted to see people get excited for a second.
Well, that's all right. And there's a lot of cockamamie theories out there about
This is my brother.
what the pyramids are and how they were built. The how they were built, I would tell you they were built over a long period of time by an entire civilization that put great care into what they were endeavoring to do. And when you study ancient history, it's very ambiguous. It's hard to know what to believe and what not to believe. And that's where our judgment and discernment comes in. That's our judgment and discernment is critical for us to discern truth from falsehood. But if we want to believe that it's impossible to build the pyramids today, and I explained some of that in my very first presentation, and it is, the ambition of my work is to continue studying that. And I'm going to continue touching on that subject. But here we're talking about these mystery traditions, and the idea that, you know, which one of these came first, how old are they, where do they originate? I'm suggesting that they all originate from Freemasonry, which is the most ancient tradition that we have that has survived or that been carried into the modern world and rediscovered. So we'll just keep moving forward, and hopefully this will come out right. So we're talking about initiation into the mysteries. We don't want to confuse the mysteries we don't want to confuse Freemasonry, for instance, with what is modern Lodge Masonry. You know, modern Lodge Masonry basically functions as an interface between municipality and the public. And like I said, I mean, we already stated that all institutions are infiltrated. All. You know, people have the idea everybody else's institution is corrupted, but mine is sanitized. You know, that's erroneous thinking. All institutions are infiltrated, but Freemasonry reemerged in the modern world in the West post-Renaissance. And in my second presentation, we were talking about how after the Council of Nicaea, they promoted what you could term an anti-intellectualism. If you wanted to learn, you could only learn from Scripture, and you could only receive that knowledge from their priests. Everything else, the Greek sciences and philosophies, were restricted in the West. But in the East, Byzantine, they continued the studies of the Greek sciences and philosophies. So if you study the history of Russia, you'll find basically the same thing happened there that happened in the West. It was just about 1,000 years behind schedule. But the main point is this dark age was this occulting, this hiding of this knowledge, this restricting of this knowledge by the church. And so the Renaissance means the return of learning, you know, that's what it represents. So when we're talking about initiation, we don't want to confuse fraternal rites or initiatory rites with the totemic rites, because the totemic rites are the true knowledge that we need. And you're not going to receive those until you get into the esoteric degrees. And, you know, you may get into the esoteric degrees in the lodge system and still not receive the totemic rites. And I would suggest that it may be because their highest initiates don't really deserve that title. They don't really deserve that degree. They don't have that to give you. And besides that, nobody else can do our work for us anyway. So once you reach the esoteric degrees, there's not really somebody, even if they are more raised in the esoteric degrees, that can really measure your consciousness. But if you're not reaching the esoteric degrees and the knowledge of the arcane knowledge of the knowledge of archetypes and symbol, then somebody who is raised into the esoteric degrees has a wider spectrum. And if you're in a smaller spectrum, they can measure your consciousness. So it's up to us to broaden that spectrum and get that full spectrum, that 360-degree perception in darkness. So in order to understand the pyramid text fully, we would have to understand the totemic rites. because the knowledge that we're talking about never existed in a textual form. So everything that's going on in religion, they're not conflicting over whose God or whose information has providence. They're conflicting over a translation, an interpretation of that. And they're failing to recognize that the knowledge that we're talking about never existed in text. So if it does exist in text, we have to consider that it's ambiguous. We have to consider that the knowledge was lost. And from the point it got lost until the Renaissance, essentially there's nescience, which means it's an impossibility to fully recover what's been lost. So anybody claiming that they have the whole, body of the knowledge is a false claim, because the knowledge never existed in text. So when you study archaeology, it's really frustrating, because it's the same thing that you find in religion, but it's frustrating because they will only focus on things that are of a textual form. And if they're not using terms, like totemic rites and the ritual and the evolution of the mythos, you already know there's a cul-de-sac there. So, but ultimately, the ritual of Osiris is biggest part of what's come down to us, and that comes from the middle of the solar mythos, which I would say began about 100,000 years ago. So about 50,000 years ago, I would say that's where what we could call the eschatology, which is the end, the final things, is perfected in the solar mythos. It's the eschatology is perfected in the solar mythos, because I'm not going to explain this to where we're going to fully understand it, but in the stellar, it's much more difficult to understand, because it's totemic rites, and it's dealing with the zootypes and the things that I was discussing in the first presentation. But if we can understand the astrotheology and understand this ritual of this Osiris, see, because it started with the polarities, which became Horus and Set in the hero myth. And Horus, represented the one that returned to the source. Okay, Horus returns to the source. He raises in consciousness. And Set refuses to return to the source. So the Setian principle is that which refuses to return to the source. And the irony is that the returning to the source is embracing the unseen shadow self as the hidden aspect, the unseen aspect. And so to get to the light, we have to go through the darkness. And I don't know if I'm fully explaining that, but we have these first two characters, this Horus and this Set. Well, they exist before Osiris and Ra. And I'm hoping I can get you up to speed on this more as we go through this. We're going to get a little bit into this Osiris myth. But the main thing I was making the point on this slide is to discern initiatory rites or fraternal rites from the all-important totemic rites. Because initiatory rites and fraternal rites are exclusive to a particular organization or institution. constitution. The totemic rights are the true knowledge that you earn the privilege to access as you raise into degrees, and then discover the totemic rights. And then with that knowledge, you're well equipped to deal with the information in the world. But one other thing is, comparative religion. I want to make sure I made that point, that if we don't look across the religions and the traditions comparatively and find what is ubiquitous, the same, the ubiquity in the different traditions is where the real bigger pieces of the puzzle are. So that's why it's called comparative religion. So it's good if you know a lot about one religion, because that'll help you when you encounter another tradition to see something that has ubiquity. But it's in that ubiquity that you're going to find the path. So that was the point I wanted to make about that. So, and we're just going to take a quick look at the relation and what some of these mystery traditions are. Now here we have the Kabbalah combined with the Tarot. And I would suggest you couldn't understand one without the other. Like I said, all three are really the key. Because they're just methods, but they constitute advancements in the methods. So I'm not going to break these slides down much. I'm just showing you how you have the tarot cards overlaid on the Sephirah of the Kabbalah, and how that's all important. And then the microcosmic tree of life and the macrocosmic tree of life. And it's a fascinating study. It's essential to study these things. It's an ongoing process. And here again, I'm just showing you the relation of the Kabbalah and the Tarot. And also the Hebrew characters, Yod, He, Vod, He. And these, you're going to deal with these. This earth, air, water, and fire are the essential elements. That's kind of where my path started. So anything I heard, earth, air, water, fire, I'm on. And the first thing it led me to was in mysticism. But the fifth element, these are the four elements of the ancient world. But the fifth element is the hidden element. And that's the element of ether, or pure spiritual awareness, the essence of the being. But here you see in the Kabbalah, it's divided into 4 planes of existence. Asiya is the physical world, or the material plane, earth, and it corresponds to the pentacles, the Ace of Pentacles. And then Yetzirah is the formative world, the mental plane. Vod corresponds to air, or swords, the Ace of Swords in the Tarot. And then the third plane is Bria, which is the creative world, the emotional plane, water, cups, Ace of Cups in the Tarot. And then Atzilith, archetypal world, plane of will, Yod, fire, the Ace of Wands in the Tarot. And so we keep that in mind, because this earth, air, fire, water is the pentagram. Okay, and they represent the base existence, self. So the pentacle, which is the 5-pointed star in the upright position, represents the 5th point, which is the top point, represents the spiritual, raised above the physical. triumph of spirit over materialism. So in the inverted position, that represents the spirit driven into the ground. Materialism triumphs over spirituality, our true essence. And that's the 4. And that 4 is, very significant because it represents the physical world. And our purpose is to raise out of that base consciousness and get that pentagram or pentacle in the upright position. So I hope I'm explaining that. Okay. So we've already broken that down. And here in the Kabbalah it shows that the left-hand path is the pillar of severity, and the right-hand path is the pillar of mercy. And then the middle pillar is the pillar of mindness.
That's a mildness.
I'm sorry. Okay, so the middle pillar is the pillar of mildness. But I'm showing you just to point out the relation between the Freemasonic First Degree Board of Solomon's Temple, so we can understand how these correspond. Now that man sitting there is a very interesting character. That's Lon Milo Duquette.
Hey.
Where? Sitting where?
And he is a wealth of knowledge of especially Kabbalah and Tarot. And I saw him in the what's it called, Magical Egypt, and now we're friends on Facebook, And this guy is just a pioneer of modern Kabbalism. He probably one of the most knowledgeable people out there about Kabbalah and Tarot. So I would highly recommend looking into some of his work. And again, you see the 4 planes here under different terms and different perspectives of how to define them. The 4 planes he defines, or in this situation defined as Nefesh, the animal soul, Ruach, the mind's eye, Neshama, intuition, and then Chia, universal life force. So tarot, we can refer to or consider to be the wheel of truth, and here we find these anagrams in this word. So rota equals wheel in Latin. Tarot equals tarot, derivation. Erot equal cultivate, grow. Latin aro, arare. Orat equals speak. Latin oro, orare. Excuse me. Torah equal law. Hebrew, Torah. And Ator equal Hathor, Egyptian goddess of love. So from that we can create the sentence, the wheel of tarot cultivates. It speaks the law of Hathor. Or the wheel of tarot brings order by telling us the law of love. And that's the Wheel of Fortune card from the tarot. Now this slide, we can see this relation of this menorah to the Kabbalah. And that, to me, automatically, I know that this Kabbalism is far more than 100,000 years old. Because we have that number 7. And everything in the 7 comes originating in the stellar mythos, which are the pyramid builders. And that's extremely important to understand because to me, as soon as I see this, I know how ancient this really is. And well, I'll just give you, you can see the Sephiro here. I'll just tell you the names. The top Sephiro is Keter, and then we go to the right down to Shokma or Hokma, and then over to Binah, and then down to Yesod, and then over to Gubarah, and then Tifereth in the middle, and then Netzah, and then Hod, and then Yesod, and then Malkuth. So there's 10 Sephirah. Da'at, which is in the upper portion there, it's behind the tree of life. And it's not a Sephirah. So it's not 9 Sephirah, and it's not 11 Sephirah. There's 10 Sephirah. And that's important to understand. The Da'at is the journeyman. The one who has initiated onto the journey, onto the path. And that would be represented, I suppose, by the Fool card. But there's much more to this stuff, and that's why I wanted to refer you to the Long-Minded Duquette and Mark Passio especially, because he breaks this down a lot more in depth than I would even be able to. But a lot of what the pyramids are is this, because it represents those 3 pillars. So I'm going to keep moving forward here. Just showing you the relationship between the chakra tradition and how they correspond. So here we got Maldura is Muladhara is the root chakra. Swadhisthana is the sacrum chakra. So that corresponds to Saturn, root, and then Jupiter, sacrum. Then Manipura, solar plexus chakra, corresponds to Mars. And then Anahata chakra, corresponding to Earth, heart. Then Vishuddha chakra, throat chakra, corresponding to Venus. And then Ajna chakra, third eye chakra, corresponding to Mercury. And Mercury is the closest to the sun, so it's the closest to the light, the closest to the source. And it also moves the fastest around the sun, so it's the quicksilver. The one that can't be God, but to be as closely connected to access direct knowledge from the source. And that's what that is really about allegorically. But these are the Elohim, the wanderers. Excluding Earth, that would be Moon, the wanderers. But the Elohim being plural for gods. El being God, many gods. And these were the wanderers, the Elohim. So anyway, I'll just keep moving forward here. So in Freemasonry, we have 3 degrees. And the first degree is the entered apprentice. The second degree is the Fellowcraft, and the third degree is Master Mason. And when we were fortunate enough to get the tour of the Grand Lodge in Philadelphia, we learned that Master Masons were receiving a degree after only 3 or 4 weeks of joining into their lodge, or being accepted into their lodge. And that's preposterous, you know, the idea that somebody could earn that degree of achievement in the esoteric mysteries in that amount of time. It's just not even feasible. But most people that are even at or past the second degree board, they don't really deserve that, because they have not been through what we can call this middle chamber. And they can say that they are, but that doesn't make it true, you know. So, you know, my qualifications or criteria for that would be knowledge of archetypal language, and that takes an intense study over, you know, it takes a long period of time and a focused, continuous study. Symbolism. So I'm not going to try to break these down, but this is what is in occultism. This is the most hidden knowledge in the world, is the knowledge to be able to fully break down these boards and understand. And you can study each one of these boards as a book in and of itself. So, you know, we'll look at the second degree board there. You see when he comes through the pillars, the staircase is a spiral staircase, and it goes up and around, and you can't really see what's up and around on that floor, and the mysteries he's trying to access are way above that. So there's so much in each one of these boards, but my favorite is the second degree board. And I mean, you could break these boards down for hours and we still would not even be scratching the surface. I mean, it's a lifetime study. Each board is a book in and of itself. So we'll just keep moving forward. So what is Freemasonry? Freemasonry is considered by its adherents to be a system of morality which is veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols. The first 3 degrees or levels of knowledge communicated to the new Masonic initiates are entered apprentice, Fellowcraft, and Master Mason. These symbolically represent the 3 aspects of consciousness: thought, emotion, and action, respectively. Freemasonry is an ancient esoteric tradition which is about knowing the self, becoming a builder of a better mind and soul, and ultimately the resurrection of morality within a human being, as personified by the legend of the master builder Hiram Abiff. So what is this middle chamber, you know? This is what the second degree board is about. And it's really about, you know, raising our frequencies to decode these symbols and these archetypes. And because only then can we make the correspondences and receive information, the sublime information. The information that's right in front of us, but we're unable to decode. So an understanding of natural law requires penetrating the world of the occult. Knowledge of natural law is the most occulted knowledge on earth. Well, anyway, like I said, I've only met a few people that I feel have actually entered that middle chamber. And many that do run out screaming never to return. And they dig their grave right there. But you have to get through the middle chamber to get to the higher degree. And what's in that middle chamber is basically doors. And you don't really know what's inside of each one of those doors, but you come in there with the spiritual armor to deal with what is ever in behind those doors and bring those things into balance, to transmute all that is into something that's beneficial to the species. That's the key to transmuting. Joseph Campbell says, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. So until we've really entered into that middle chamber, which is basically connecting to our subconscious, we really are still on the floor of base consciousness.
Slide.
And few have, you know. And it can be terrifying, especially if we're in a left brain imbalance. I mean, it would be like a feeling of weightlessness, of floating through space. You know, we wouldn't have the spiritual armor to deal with what we're going to find in there. And it's vast, it's broad, you know, it's dark. And we have to be able to be prepared to transmute whatever we find in there into something that's beneficial to the species. Well, here, I don't know what this is, but the term cult usually refers to a social group defined by its religious, spiritual, or philosophical beliefs, or its common interest in a particular personality, object, or goal. The term itself is controversial, and it has divergent definitions in both popular culture and academia, and it also has been an ongoing source of contention among scholars across several fields of study. You know, so what I was working on here is this term cult, not to confuse it with the occult, which is hidden. You know, cult represents a group of people that adheres to certain behaviors and traditions and beliefs. So, you know, the main thing is don't let that term frighten us from looking into things. And don't join one, you know, but understand that ultimately it's derived from agriculture, which means to grow something. So to be in a state of growth is what we want. That's what we're trying to achieve. Now here I brought these slides so we can look at these obelisks. And I'm showing here, this is the Needle of Cleopatra in Paris. And this was directly taken from this temple in Egypt, the Temple of Luxor, which is a sacrilege, you know, to me, because separating one pillar from the other means polarization. Only when they're together are they in balance. And this is an atrocity to me. It's anathema to think that somebody had the right to do this. But there's 3 of these obelisks that have been taken from Egypt, Cleopatra, or the Needle of Cleopatra. One is in Paris, one is in London, and one is in Central Park in New York. But this particular one was taken from this Temple of Luxor in Egypt, which is said to be, you know, roughly about 4,000 to 5,000 years old. Could be a little older than that. But the main point I wanted to make about it is to show that this is Freemasonry. And that's ubiquity. That's the ubiquity that we're looking for. This is Freemasonry. Well, okay, now all of a sudden Freemasonry is 5,000 years old. And it's far older than that, because I told you it's in those pyramids. And those pyramids, you may not hear this number anywhere else, but I'm stating that those pyramids are 150,000 years old. So now Freemasonry is even far older than what we originally thought it was. And originally known as the craft. But I would suggest that the controlling classes do not want us to understand Freemasonry. Or they're waiting for us to understand Freemasonry, and they're, building fortresses to hide behind until we do learn it, because until we do learn it, we're just a bunch of rabid apes, So without really knowledge of what Freemasonry is and is about, we are floundering in darkness. We can't really understand that it's our responsibility to know and understand this stuff. So let's see what I got written here. The obelisk in Paris is known as the Luxor obelisk and is made of yellow granite, constructed about 3,000 years ago. It was originally situated outside the Luxor temple in Egypt, where it still remains. The Paris obelisk is 75 feet tall and weighs over 250 tons. All three obelisks are inscribed with hieroglyphs glorifying Ramesses II. And I would suggest that Ramesses is about the precession of the equinoxes in the age of Aries, the ram. So that suggests that this temple was constructed in the age of Aries. So this ram is all important to understand. But ram symbolism is extremely advanced. Ram symbolism is one of the most complex symbols because it represents so many aspects, particularly the initiate rising, because rams can go so high on the mountains that they just seemingly cling to the sides. It's part of it. But main thing I was going with this slide is showing you that what these temples in Egypt is Freemasonry. So that's that ubiquity I'm talking about. And the other thing is, all of the exoteric religions make claim to be the origins of Freemasonry. And the reason that they want to do that is because that would mean that they are the source of all knowledge. And then that bolsters their faith. That bolsters their institution. But the truth of the matter is that all of the exoteric religions are created out of a detritus out of what Freemasonry actually is. Manly P. Hall says, when the human race learns to read the language of symbolism, a great veil will fall from the eyes of men. And then this here just shows the two institutions that are in the modern world of Freemasonry. And on the left, with the 33 degrees, is the Scottish Rite. And then on the right, there's 10 degrees, that's the York Rite. And in the York Rite, we have what's called Royal Arch Masonry. And Royal Arch Masonry is significant, it's a study in and of itself, but there's so much in this, I'll tell you, it's there. And these at the lower levels, these are what you call the portico masons, the porch masons, the Shriners. They're not really raised in the esoteric knowledge, but they've passed their fraternal initiatory rites, so their behaviors are in alignment with the traditions. There's a lot more to that, but we're going to keep going. Now, Time magazine, which I'm no fan of, put out an article or an issue dealing with secret society. and at least outlines, you know, what is encompassed by that term secret societies. And I've been reading through this stuff, and there's a lot of good things to say, but you know, it can only be just an introduction to really fully understanding what these are and what these are about. And some of the articles include Eternal Geometry, Secret Societies of the Past, The Lost Crusade, Decline and Fall of the Knights Templar, Mason's Mark, Freemasons of the Archetypal Secret Society, Rosicrucians, How a Fictional Seer Shaped the Enlightenment, The Illuminati, A German Professor Sought to Change the World, Frauds and Forgeries, From the Priory of Sion, The Elders of Zion, Fraternal Society, Skull and Bones Meet Bohemian Grove, Skull and Bones Meet Bohemian Grove, and then The World of Dan Brown, who wrote the novels The Da Vinci Code, Angels and Demons, and The Lost Symbol. And then The Face of the Modern Thriller, Dan Brown's pursuit of the elusive bestseller. Creeds in Hiding, The Gospel Truth, Secrets of Opus Dei, The Lash, The Cash, and Beyond the Rumors. Exiles of Falun Gong, Chinese cracks down on a spiritual group, Sins of the Fathers, The Maverick Mormon Sect Battles the Law, Adventures in the Occult, The Wicked Ways of Aleister Crowley, The Cult Mentality, Manson Family Values, a cult for a counterculture era, led to the slaughter, A False Prophet Preaches Mass Suicide, Jim Jones Tragedy, Apocalypse Now, Branch Davidians, Final Stand, The Chosen Few, From Heaven's Gate to Mass Weddings, Outside the Law, When Hatred Wears a Hood, The Bloody Trial of the Ku Klux Klan, Conflicts of Blood and Oath, The Twisted Moral Code of the Mafiosa, showing the colors, the criminal elite on the street. So I recommend you pick up a copy of that and work with it, because I think it's pretty important. JFK said the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. And that's the great seal of all Masonry, and also the great seal of the United States. So this is complex symbolism. I'm not going to try to fully break this down, but it's very important to understand. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, a symbol is worth 1,000 pictures. The symbol is worth 1,000 pictures. A sigil is worth 1,000 symbols. If a sigil is worth 1,000 symbols, a talisman is worth 1,000 sigils. So, you know, in this all-seeing eye symbol, you have the terms Annuit Coeptus, and at the bottom on the banner, Novus Ordo Seclorum, which can be defined as the New World Order. And that's what it actually means. But it means, you know, we're all builders. And it's about, are we building with light, or are we building with bricks and walling ourselves off in ignorance? So the top phrase, Annuit Coeptus, it means basically he, she, or it, the source, the one, favors our work. And if we choose to build hell on earth, we have free will to make that choice. And it favors our work because it gave us the great gift of free will. If we choose to build a paradise, it favors our work. So we have to know, are we building with light or are we building with bricks? And these are just some some emblems that represent fraternal and honor societies. Just, I'm sure there's, you know, an unlimited amount of these, but they all represent just, exclusive societies. And we can let our imagination run wild as to what these are, but let's just look at it from this perspective. If you're a doctor, you have certain knowledge, and you want to have a constituency, that has knowledge that you share, and you want to be among people that can understand what you're talking about. And that's what these honor societies are, where their minds can come together and further expound on their particular, specialized line of research, or in some cases, actually dealing with mystery traditions. So, all of these things are part of this, and that's the main point I'm trying to make. We've been talking about Freemasonry quite a bit, and here we see some of the things that we would find in a Masonic lodge. And one of the most significant is the apron, but you have the checkerboard floor, you have the pillars, and you have different degree initiates. Basically just taking a look at what we might expect to find here. But what it's really about is a war between science and religion, that's what this whole thing is about. It's what's called epistemology. How we come to know what knowledge actually is. That's what epistemology is. So this war between science and religion. Nikola Tesla said science is but a perversion of itself unless it has as its ultimate goal the betterment of humanity. So when you have the rise of the Roman Church and this suppression of the learning of the Greek sciences and philosophies, that constitutes that this organization, this institution, fears anything that challenges its dogmatic scripture. So its intent is to shun that and restrict that. So the Renaissance constitutes a return of learning into the West, where it's been restricted. And Thomas Aquinas' work has a lot to do with that, because as soon as they know they can't hold that knowledge back from humanity forever, so they have to find a way to make it acceptable and move us towards this industrial age, and then the age of technology, which gives rise to the age of technology. But that gives rise to terms like fideism. Well, what is fideism? Fideism, basically, I would define it as reason is not ignored, but faith prevails. So we'll consider reason, whereas otherwise we would have rejected it, but faith prevails. So if we come into a debate, let's go back to the faith. And here this definition maintains that faith is independent of reason, or that reason and faith are hostile to each other, and faith is superior at arriving at particular truths. The word fideism comes from fides, the Latin word for faith, which literally means faithism. So to me, that's a very intriguing term, fideism, and it has a lot to do with Thomas Aquinas' work. But it has to do with the Renaissance, what's happening in that period of time. So how long have I been speaking?
About 2 hours.
Are you kidding me? Well, let's take a break here then. I got a little bit more to go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I thought I had that wrapped in an hour. It turned out to be 2, which is my maximum allotted time. So we're under some serious time pressure here. And we got other speakers waiting to speak. So what I want to do is just apply the second part to the video that I make from this. And then we'll have the whole thing and we'll all be able to access it. It's documented. We can all work with it. But the good part we didn't get to, you know, I kind of knew we wouldn't. It was open-ended anyway, so it's really not a failure. It's okay. And there's certain points that I was trying to make that I was giving you foundations for being able to make, and I've got a list of some of those points. So just take a look at this list. If I'm able to make any of those points real quick now, I'll just do that real quick and then jump out of the way and John can get started.
Why don't you take that?
Take mine off.
Yeah.
It won't matter. The main thing that we didn't get to ascertain from the information presented is going to be in the second part. But it's dealing with the forming of guilds. And guilds, you know, they constituted exclusive societies and recognized in their craft. So their craft became what you might call intellectual property, or each guild had earned the right to exist and operate within its society. But the main point was that how the builders became the caretakers of the knowledge, even unknowingly, in their methods, and specifically architecture, because it was the knowledge of the esoteric mysteries was hidden in the tools and the implements and their building techniques and their cathedral building. And that particular guild is the guild that had free access to Rome over Europe freely, and also enjoyed a tax-exempt status. But we'll get into that in the second half. The main thing to understand is they became the caretakers of the knowledge because all of the learned men were murdered. And they were only initiated into the lesser degrees. So through them, the knowledge was transported into the West and preserved through time. And we have an opportunity now to unveil that knowledge. It's still here. Once it's gone, there's little hope, and actually no hope, that we would ever break the bondage of perpetual slavery. So with this knowledge available to us, we have a responsibility to uncover and discern what it actually is. And so these builders became the caretakers of the knowledge and transported through time, which allowed for the Renaissance to happen, which basically started as Rosicrucianism. And then that gave rise to Freemasonry, and not to be confused with Lodge Masonry, but that's what gives rise to the lodge systems that start to emerge. And that's all going to be in the second half. And then we're going to break down the difference between being a true symbolist and going on an Easter egg hunt, like in Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code. There's a difference between going on an Easter egg hunt and trying to unravel some conspiracy created by the church to solve a murder, than to getting to the true esoteric mysteries and discovering this esoteric science. And you know, one of the points that I'm saving for the second half, but I'm going to give it away now anyway. No, I better not. You're not gonna
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, when I get into the Dan Brown, you know, it's played by Tom Hanks in the movie. And he's what I'd call the Forrest Gump of symbology. So thank you very much.